Good evening, everybody. This is Dr. RickyAllmon. Welcome to Life Talks Leadership After Dark. This is the conversation where we seek to empower you to explore your potential, engage your passions, and expand your possibilities. I'm so glad to be on with you. I hope your week has been highly productive so far. And I hope you're looking forward to a great Friday and an amazing weekend. But before you get there, I've got something that I want to share with you that I hope will be transportation for your transformation. Tonight, I want to talk from the subject, the new abnormal. Some things never change. That's what I want to talk about tonight. The new abnormal. I know you've heard since this pandemic began about the new normal. And of course, the new normal simply means uh, that in many ways, things will never be like they were. That in many instances, there's nothing to go back to in certain contexts within our society. And so we have tagged that the new normal. Well, I need you to understand that systemic in that new normal is also a new abnormal. I know you saying, Dr. Allman, what in the world are you talking about? Okay, so here we go. Now, I need you to understand tonight's conversation is for leaders. And I know Life Talks is for leaders in general. But tonight, I want to specifically talk to organizational leaders. Whether you are in the hallowed halls of the highest level of politics, whether you are the leader of a nonprofit or a pastor of a church or an entrepreneur, or you got a mom and pop store on a corner in the hood. I want to talk to organizational leaders. Here is why. Because there's a fly in the apothecary of what we're calling the new normal. And that fly is this new abnormal. What I mean by that is, it's intriguing to me that you have some leaders, particularly organizational leaders. And as I mentioned before, even when this pandemic began, we literally had an individual in the highest office in the United States of America who chose to ignore the inevitable. What's most intriguing about that is when you ignore the inevitable, it causes you to not accept and embrace the obvious. So if you ignore what's getting ready to happen, if you don't pay attention to the trends, the reality is we're doing things now in many cases, particularly when you deal with organizational leadership in certain contexts, we're doing things now that we should have been doing 5 or 10 years ago. Maybe even you as an individual are doing things now that you should have been doing before. And so that's what I want to explore tonight. I want to talk about those new abnormals and help you to shift to the new normal. Because I've come to discover as we've walked through these months since March, and as I look across the leadership landscape in various contexts of leadership, I'm watching many leaders, more than a few, still wrestle with the new normal. And there is this uh, sentimentality, this desire to, I guess, go back to old normal, denying all the signs, denying all the evidence, ignoring the fact that there are just some things that will absolutely unequivocally never be what they were. And so I want to help you walk through this. I know it's not comfortable. I know you wish some things can go back to like they were. Um, and just us as individuals, we're not able to travel like we want to. We can't do vacations like we want to. Can't have people just hang out with you. Can't go to restaurants. And I know, you know, those things can be uncomfortable. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge them within the context of where we are and then live accordingly. So that's what I'm getting ready to help you do tonight over these next 15 minutes is I want to help you to acknowledge the normal that you're in so that you won't be abnormal in it, so that you can live according to it. And when you learn to align yourself with the reality around you, then you can maximize what that reality has for you. Let me say that again. When you align yourself with the reality around you, then you can maximize what that reality has for you. In other words, you don't have to become a prisoner to that reality. You just have to know how to have the proper response to that reality. And so there are three things that I want to highlight tonight that I hope will help you to navigate this reality that we're in so that you can get the most out of it. The first thing I need you to understand is that if you're going to break out of the rut of the new abnormal and not ignore and be unaccepting of the elephant in the room, the first thing you got to do is you got to accept that things are different. What that means is you have to decide which side of history you're going to be standing on. There is nothing worse than to be on the wrong side of history. So, as a leader, you've got to accept the fact that things are just different. You didn't do it, it's beyond your control, but it is what it is. Things are different, and you have to make the decision to accept that. Why is it important for you to accept that? I'm so glad you asked. Because in this reality, change is a necessity, not an option. I always said like this: change facilitates growth, and growth necessitates change. Let me say that again. Change facilitates growth, but growth necessitates change. You can talk about growing all day long, but if you're not willing to make the change, all you're doing is having a conversation. There will be no transformation. So when you accept that things are different, you make a decision that, okay, I'm going to get on the right side of this so I can get the best out of this. And in order for me to get the best out of this, I've got to understand that change is the order of the day. Here's what I need you to realize. You can't make things better if you don't do something different. What areas of your life have you been saying, I want this to be better? I want this to be better. I want my relationship better. But you never change your patterns. You never change your cycle. You keep doing things as you've always done it. I don't mean to sound trite and parochial. I know you've heard it. But there's a saying that says insanity is to keep doing the same thing and expect different results. If I can take it another further, and you may have heard this one too, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. So you've got to do something different if you're going to have something better. So when you accept that things are different, you then realize you have to do something different if you're going to make things better. Now, here's what this looks like in practical application. That means that you have to do an assessment of the best use of your time, because now that we're in this virtual space, now that we're not able to congregate, the rules of engagement have shifted. So now you've got to decide, how are you going to use your time? Because you don't want to get lost in the rabbit hole of social media or on YouTube, unless you're watching live talks with Dr. RickyAllmon, of course. But you got to do an assessment. How are you going to use your time? What's the best use of your talent? Where can your talent be most effective? And then what resources do you have available? Human resources and relationships, as well as other resources that you have. What's the best use of those resources? How can you maximize those resources? That may mean that during this time, you've got to go take a course. You need to sharpen your skills in an area that you hadn't been using skills in before, because you've got to make a pivot in your career, or you see another opportunity that will allow you to have financial independence. But you've got to do an assessment. So that's number one. Accept that things are different. Make a decision about what you're going to do different so things can be better. Number two, you have to acknowledge that adjustments have to be made. You have to acknowledge that adjustments have to be made. You know what I think about, and this is actually in the Bible, it talks about a person looking in the mirror and seeing that there is something that needs to be corrected, but they walk away from the mirror without correcting what needed to be corrected, as if it was going to auto-correct. And sometimes that's how we go through life. We think just making a decision that it needs to change is enough. No. You've got to acknowledge that action needs to be taken on your decision. So acknowledge that adjustments need to be made, which means after you decide, you've got to define. You've got to define what works and what doesn't work. Here's what you got to understand, and this is so critical. I need you to write this down. In this new reality that we're in, if you're going to be a part of the new normal instead of the new abnormal, I need you to get this. You've got to understand that functionality requires fluidity. You didn't hear what I said. You've got to understand. I think I'm going to give myself an applause. You've got to understand that in this new normal, functionality requires fluidity. In other words, just because something worked before, don't assume that it's going to work now. So here's what you got to do. If you're going to make the necessary adjustments, if you're going to define your reality, if you're going to define your purpose so that you can maximize productivity, number one, you got to decide what your non-negotiables are. Like, what are the things you know you have to do? What are the things that you know are intrinsic to your identity, to your brand, to your purpose, to your passion, to your productivity? Identify your non-negotiables first. Now, once you identify your non-negotiables, then you have to do something that my wife calls prioritizing the priority. Once you say, okay, these are the things I have to do. These things are intrinsic to the very fabric and fiber and core of who I am. If I don't have these attributes, if I'm not working with these things, if I'm not using this skill set, then you don't have me. Okay, wonderful. But now that you know that, prioritize your priority. What should you be giving who you are to? And one of the things I always talk about is being able to differentiate between what deserves the best of you and the best from you. There is a difference, because things that get the best from you, that's transactional. In other words, you share your time, you share your talent, you share your resources, you share your competency, you share your intellect, you share your creativity. Those are things that are given from you. That's transactional. But to give the best of you is relational. And so as you make adjustments, as you define your reality, you've got to determine in a very definitive way what's transactional, what's relational. And then you have to then discern, what is it in my transactional space can be transferred to my relational space? And what is it in my relational space that could serve to fulfill transactions? So what deserves the best from you? That's transactions. That's sharing your talents, your abilities. But then what deserves the best of you? The reason it's so critical to understand that, because if you give the best of you in a transaction, you're going to find yourself in a deficit, because you're not going to get back from that transaction what you gave to it, because you gave something that's systemic to you. And so you're looking for it to replenish you. No, all that transaction wanted was what it could get out of you. It had no intention of adding something else to you beyond the transaction. So wherever and whomever you give the best of yourself to has to have the capacity to be able to add back to your life, to help you to fine tune and sharpen your skills so that you can become the best version of who you are. So number one, accept that things are different. Make a decision. Number two, acknowledge that adjustments have to be made, which means you got to define your reality. But then thirdly and finally, be accountable to reality. In this pandemic world, the epidemiologists say, don't ignore the science. Follow the science. Pay attention to the science. Well, in a life construct, you've got to be accountable to your reality. In other words, I don't care how well you've done something before and how well it worked and how much it produced for you. If it's not producing now, time to make a sharp right turn and pivot. And so, okay, I got to find another way to work this thing. I got to find another way to get through this because it's not working the way it used to. So that means you've got to be committed to constant development. Be committed to constant growth. Don't become stagnant. Don't become static. Don't become stale. Keep on moving forward. Here is the balance, the paradox that we've got to learn to live in and reconcile in this time. You got to learn how to be both firm and flexible. And be careful of being firm in areas you need to be flexible in. I'm going to say that again. You got to learn how to live in the paradox of being firm and flexible. In other words, you got your non-negotiables. You know what it is that's systemic and intrinsic to your identity. But then there are other things that you need to be flexible with. That maybe pre-pandemic, you was like, I'm firm on this. This is just how it's going to go. You know, it could be the rates that you charge for something, or you know, the price point you put on something. You say, this is just, well, you got to shift because the economy has shifted. So discern where you ought to be firm, where you ought to be flexible. And then in your accountability to your reality, don't be afraid to learn as you go. I'm operating in this virtual space, even though I've been in the virtual space and in the social media space for an extensive amount of time. I'm operating in this space now in a personal way, like I hadn't done pre-pandemic. Even though I've utilized social media, even though I've done live streaming, even though I've spoken before great audiences, now I'm having to make it personal, which means I become a one-man production team because I want to be able to go live whenever I need to. So I've had to acclimate to new types of technology and learn new platforms and be experiential and experimental. And so I'm learning as I go, and then I'm sharing as I learn. And I think that's great for all leaders to do. I think the excitement of this time, the reward of this time, is as you embrace this reality and as you commit yourself to continual development, be open to learn as you go, and then share as you learn. Thank you for joining me tonight. I hope that you've heard something that will engage you and empower you as you maximize potential purpose and productivity, and as you live in full possibilities. Listen, before you get off, I need you to go ahead and subscribe to this YouTube channel at Ricky Allmon. Go ahead and like this video, give it thumbs up, hit the notification bell so that you can be notified the next time I come on, and tell somebody else about it. Tell at least 5 other people. Listen, I was on Life Talks with Dr. Ricky Allmon, Leadership After Dark. He was only on for about 20 minutes, but it was poignant. It was profound. He shared some things that I can use and apply to my life in real time. So share this with other people. Also, go ahead and text the word Ricky Allmon to 22828. I want to make sure that you're connected to my Impact newsletter. I send out a newsletter maybe about once a month just to expand and elucidate some of the thoughts that I may share on here or other thoughts I have. I've got some very exciting news coming up in September that you don't want to miss, and it's only going to be shared through my Impact newsletter. So go ahead and subscribe tonight to 22828. Send Ricky Allmon to 22828. And don't put your phone down yet, because if you want to receive text notifications about whenever I'm on or whenever I have something going on that I know will benefit your life, text the word Impact Life to 31996. That's Impact Life to 31996. Listen, if there was ever a time that you need to be feeding your mind, always talk about feeding your faith and starving your fears. Reading is feeding. You heard what I said? Reading is feeding. And maybe you're not a person that likes to sit down with a book. But if you can listen to a book, I want to give you the Life Lessons audio book free. I want to give it to you free. Write this down. All you got to do is email info, I-N-F-O, at RickyAllmon.org. Info at RickyAllmon.org. I'm sure it's right there in the comments. And you can get this free. I want to give you, so just put in there free audio book. That's all I need you to put in the subject line, free audio book. I'll send you the link so you can download the audio book through Audible. And then I only ask you to do one thing. After you listen to it, or while you're listening to it, go back and write a review, and I'll send you the link for the review as well. If you say, hey, Dr. Allmon, I don't want the audio book. I actually want to read it. Well, fine. Just go to the lifelessonsbook.com and you can get it there. The lifelessonsbook.com or RickyAllmon.org, and you can get it there. Again, this is Dr. Ricky Allmon. This has been Life Talks Leadership After Dark. Thank you for joining me tonight. Have a great evening. I'll talk to you later.